Welcome to Climate Change with Scott Amyx. This is your host, Scott, and today I'm joined by Isabel Aagaard, co-founder and co-designer at LastObject. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So my understanding is that you and your brother have been working on this for some time. Both of you are trained designers from the Royal Academy of Design. What's it like to work with your brother, as well as I think there's a third partner as well that's involved?
Yes, we're three founders. Well, it's amazing to work with my brother. I enjoy it very much. We're from a very entrepreneurial family, so we've worked together since we were very little in different business aspects. So I really love it. I do.
That's great. Well, that's incredible chemistry. Now, in recent product development kind of trends, design has taken a central role when it comes to product innovation. Why do you think that's the case?
I think that it's very central when we look at products to look at the design, because the design really is what is forming how you use an object. So if the design affords the use, then the design is well designed.
And do you think that's only specific to CPG or consumable products, or it can also be to intangibles like concepts and ideas?
Definitely also intangible. We see that service design is becoming more and more something that you use when you look at digital design. So I think that when you do look at how people use it, and you're not in your Eiffel Tower as a designer, but you are influenced by the user and the use of it, then it does translate very well.
All right, so let's get into your startup, LastObject, which in itself is a very interesting name. This notion that instead of the lifestyle of disposing, it's the last product that you're going to hold on to and on a continual use basis. So tell us about the genesis of your startup as well as your first product.
Yes. Well, the idea behind LastObject is that we see a trend, and we also see an important, a huge important shift that we have right now, which is we've gone through a lot of years in society having objects that you use and discard, and the non-discarded elements are also just in general, people buy a lot and they maybe don't keep it so long, and companies are also producing a lot of objects that are planned obsolescence, that are planned to actually only have few years in it. And what we want to create, and what we also see that more and more people want to receive, is a lot of products that are just that are here to last, that are something that you will have for years to come, and not just 5 years, but decades. And this is what we want to fight, and this is what we want to create. So we've, of course, focused with LastObject. We focus on single-use items and then making reusable alternatives. So this is our main focus.
So you mentioned the term lasting for decades. So in that context, one of your first product is a LastSwab, which is replacing the cotton swab. So when people think about cleaning your ears as an example, or maybe some makeup, eyelash, whatnot, they want to think about disposing it because they consider it dirty. But you're talking about using a swab substitute for decades. Tell us about that, and more importantly, the research behind the data.
Yes. Well, we found out when we started exploring this single-use market, we found out that the cotton swab, although it's very small, it has a huge impact on the environment, and it's mostly because of the way that you discard of it. But it's also because we actually have so many that are created. We found out that around 1.5 million cotton swabs are produced daily, and this is just huge numbers. So we wanted to create an alternative to something that is so not reusable. And we went into this. It's a quite hygienic product, but it does really resonate with the users. And we were a little afraid that it would be too disgusting or a little gooey in a sense. But people have, of course, there are some that are dividing the waters, but I think it's a really good thing to actually talk about. And we don't have to go to extremes and have reusable toilet paper. I think that's something that will come. But right now, we're looking at other hygienic products that can also be used in that sense. Yes, so that's where LastSwab kind of emerged.
Well, this is just a joke, but I'm sure you guys will tackle the floss industry at some point. So speaking of the hygiene, I think it's important to talk about the material science to help the consumers understand why it's hygienic. The tip is based on TPE, which is a thermoplastic elastomers. It's a kind of a rubber-like compound that has a thermoplastic and elastometric properties. So tell us about that. What exactly is it, and how does it keep your ears clean but also maintain hygiene?
Yes. Well, LastSwab is its core is made of PP that is enforced with glass fiber, so it's very strong, which makes it very hard to break. And especially if you use it so many times, it has to have a certain level of flexibility and still come back to form. So the compound of the core is made for exactly this, that it can be bent and still not break, but also that it is flexible. In the ends, as you mentioned, is made of TPE. It's very similar to silicone. I would think that was the most that gets a feel of like the rubbery feeling of it. It's very soft in the ears. It won't scratch, so it's actually better than a cotton swab. But it has a surface where it can kind of catch any ear wax or moist that you have in your ear, and it doesn't clean it completely, which is really good for the ear because you don't want to entirely take off the surface of everything that you have. A lot of the bacteria that we have in our ears are really good for us, and we just, as people, maybe don't want too much of it, and that's fine. But it's not removing everything, which makes it very healthy. And afterwards, you wash it simply in your sink with soap and water, and it should be very, very easy to use and store.
Okay, that sounds intriguing. So in your actual sales as well as consumer studies, what's been the reaction and receptivity to something like this?
We saw in the beginning a huge interest, but also we saw a huge group that felt it was very disgusting. And this actually started quite a conversation on Facebook and Instagram. And you kind of say that, you know, all PR is good PR. And it became a huge conversation about hygiene. But there are things that we don't really think about that we reuse, but that are as hygienic, like a toothbrush. And I think it was just a very interesting conversation in the beginning. But we here in the team are so surprised how well people have taken it into their everyday lives, and now having it with so many customers, and the response that we have with the people that are using them daily are just amazing. And I'm actually very, very surprised that it has been adapted so well into an everyday life.
That's really interesting, and that kind of goes back to your core competency, which is around design. So walk us through the design of this LastSwab. So when we think about it from kind of an outside perspective, we think, gosh, it's a fairly mundane product, but yet there's material science, there's the actual aesthetics, there's a feel, tactile. Walk us through that. What was that experience like, and how many iterations did you have to go through?
Well, as a designer, you go through hundreds of iterations every time you do any product, actually. I think that the form of the swab came very natural because we wanted it to reflect the traditional cotton swab. So we wanted everybody with a picture to see, oh, I know what this is. I know how to use it. And this was this I think was very shaped very quickly. But the materials, they took more time and testing, and we went into a lot of different alternatives to solve the issue. So I think this process took the longest, getting the materials, and actually, to be honest, the box that the swab is stored in actually almost took more time to design than the actual swab, because this had to be so big of, or this is so big of a design to the swab, because it needs to be very nice and easy to handle and also put away. So it's a big part of the design in itself.
Interesting. Yeah, when we think about throwaway items, we don't think of it in terms of systems, but what you're talking about is a system where the LastSwab is just one of an entire system. So that's very interesting to think about the experience, not just from the use, but also storage and cleaning and portability as well. Let's just real briefly, we're running out of time, but briefly talk about your experience in terms of fundraising. You chose to use Kickstarter and Indiegogo, which is intriguing in itself because typically it's one or the other. And then how are you guys continuing to fund and finance this project?
We launched on Kickstarter. I think that Kickstarter is an amazing platform to validate your design, because you as a designer can very quickly end up in your ivory tower thinking your idea is absolutely amazing. And then when you put it out to the public, it's maybe hard to translate, and maybe it's hard to understand. Maybe there's no market. And these things are actually really hard to validate before you start production. It's been absolutely amazing to use this platform for kind of testing. And we'll do it actually from now on, and with our different products that are coming up, because it's such an important thing for us to be sure that this is actually something that the consumer wants, and that the price and the materials and the feel is what resonates.
Well, let's talk about your next product that you guys are working on, which is a LastTissue. Speaking of, I'm at the tail end of a cold, and I've had quite a bit of use of tissues. Let's just say, without getting into details, it's been quite difficult. So when we're dealing with tissues and the bacteria and just the general yuckiness, how are you designing this LastTissue in such a way that it can actually last for years, if not even decades?
We found that using very actually quite old materials, but materials that are really well tested, have been the basis of our design. The LastTissue is the modern take on the handkerchief. And the handkerchief in itself is actually very hygienic and very, very good for the environment. So I'll just explain just briefly. LastTissue is 6 tissues or handkerchiefs that you have that are reusable. They're from 100% organic cotton, and they're filled in a silicone carry case, you can call it, which looks exactly like a tissue box. And there's an opening in the bottom and the top, so you know where to put the dirty ones and where to put the clean ones. It was very, very important for us in creating LastTissue that we did use materials that are very well tested and that can withhold more than 400 washes. So this was the aim for the product.
So it is intriguing because we're talking about cotton. We're not talking about the cotton itself, but the actual manufacturing, the way it's actually stitched or woven together that allows for such durability?
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Everything in the design, like everything till the box, like what angle the flaps have, and everything is thought through so that it can withhold a lot of uses. And the tissues themselves are sewn with double, where you fold them double in the edge, so that there are no that they will withhold, yeah, a lot of washes.
And that includes stains as well. And then, you know, just to kind of push the boundary a little bit, is that if it's in fact that hygienic, you should in theory be able to actually share a clean last tissue, right? So
Definitely.
okay, that's very intriguing, the notion of shareable tissues. So on that note, I've been joined by Isabel Aagaard, who is the co-founder and co-designer of LastObject. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you.